2, 1. Good evening to everyone attending tonight's session. I am Professor Jeanette Maritz, and I will be your facilitator for this evening as we look at developing the doctorateness of your work. So warm welcome wherever you are in South Africa. Hope you're keeping well, or if you're from an international destination, welcome to all of you. We're having quite a cold winter, but I'm sure tonight's discussion will keep you warm and that we will have an enjoyable journey as we journey along. Just a reminder, as you know from previous discussions, if you've attended those, that we will have a question and answer session when we've done with the slides and the facilitation thereof. I will post some questions to you for the question and answers, but while we are traveling through the slides, you're also welcome to post your questions on the question and answer tab, and we will have a look at it as soon as we are done with the slides. So please keep a notebook ready for when you have questions, or if you are quite bright in this evening, then just type them in your on the question and answer section. So let's have a start, and let's start with our topic for tonight. So when we are looking at developing the doctorateness of our work, I was having a bit of trouble with just the topic as it is now. And I was wondering, where does the most work lie in developing the doctorateness of our work? And I want to argue that the doctorateness of our work is on 2 levels. The first level is with ourselves, the work with ourselves, and then the work of our research. So I would want to state that we are working on 2 levels, and you will see that the slides also addresses those 2 levels of the doctorateness. So tonight's slides, I'm just going to give you a quick overview. We've started with a welcome introduction. There's a few notes that I still want to tell you. We're going to have a look at the overview of the sections, and then each overview or each topic will have specific learning objectives so that you can check your understanding as we go. So in terms of the welcome and the introduction, I've introduced myself, but I'd really like to welcome you as an audience. If you have been chosen into a doctorate program or for a PhD, I want to welcome you as a very, very distinguished audience. And why I'm saying that you're a distinguished audience, you, when you graduate, will make up the 1% of the South African population that has a doctorate. And if you think about our population in South Africa, 1%, you will become one of the distinguished few that hold a doctorate in South Africa. The doctorate population worldwide is around 2.5% of the population, so that differs from country to country, but in South Africa it's more or less 1%. So you can imagine that you are very special. You are special for the reason that if you have been chosen into a doctorate program, you're busy with your doctorate, that you were selected by a very critical panel. Because they believed in your ability to do a doctorate study at a very advanced level. So in saying that, you are very much a very distinguished group of people that are very special in that you have been chosen by your peers and by experts in the field who believe that you have the skills and ability to pull it off. So I want to start off with that, and I want to tell you that when you experience times of being disheartened or feel low, that you keep on telling yourself, I am one of the selected few, and I wouldn't be in this program if others didn't believe that I could be successful. So that's just my bit in terms of welcoming you as an audience. Those of you who are maybe thinking of doing a doctorate, that could also motivate you why you might want to enroll in this journey, which is long. It can take up to, well, the minimum would be 2 years. The average is about 4 years. Doing part-time about 5 years, and 5 years is the requirement to do it in the acceptable time as put out in the CHE and the NRA guidelines. Okay, so let's have a look at what we're going to discuss tonight. So our first topic is going to be around understanding doctorateness. What does it mean? How do we define it? How do we know it? And what's the attributes? And then we're also going to have a look at the transitioning from a master's to doctoral level, not just in, well, thinking, in our thinking, definitely, that's a main part, but also the transitions that's required of you from a master, from being a master's student to a doctoral student. We can having a look at developing a doctoral mindset, your research design and methodology at a doctoral level, your contribution to knowledge, writing at a doctoral level, and then we will end with conclusions and some time for questions and answers. So more or less our agenda for tonight, and under each of these there will be learning objectives where you can self-evaluate and see where you find yourself along the journey. So if you were thinking this presentation is just about research designs and methodology, it is much more than that. So although we're going to touch on doctoral level research designs and methodology to some extent, please also attend the other training that is more focused on literature reviews, research designs, methodologies, that would then also include these at a doctoral level. So our take on this topic tonight is from a wider perspective, and that also includes the work on yourself. So let's have a look at the first objective, or the first topic. Understanding doctorateness. When at the end of today's or tonight's session, you should be able to define what doctorateness is and explain its importance in postgraduate research. The reason for that being, if you don't understand what it is that you're busy with, you can't be plodding along for 4 or 5 years and never really know what it is that you are working towards. So we're going to spend some time in just understanding the concept of doctorateness, and the rest of our discussion tonight will be around how do you go about achieving that doctorate. So when we aim to understand doctorateness, the first important aspect is to understand that a doctorate or a PhD is on the NQ level 10. Which is the highest level of education that you can obtain. So that's the pinnacle. Level 10 is the pinnacle of your academic or your learning trajectory that you can achieve. So again, quite something significant. So once you've completed the doctorate program, you will receive your doctorate degree and have reached the highest NQF level. It requires a candidate to undertake research at the most advanced academic levels. Now, if you start getting worried, let's have a look further. So Yazdini and Shaku define doctorateness as, very importantly, a personal quality that follows a developmental or a transformative apprenticeship process that results in the formation of an independent scholar with a specific identity and a level of competence and the creation of an original contribution which extends knowledge through scholarship and then the receipt of the highest academic degree and culminates stewardship of the discipline. Now, very important in this definition, you will see that a great part of the definition speaks around personal quality, identity, development, transformative, independent scholar. Those are all aspects where you will be working on and with yourself. And then it culminates in the creation of original contribution and extends the knowledge in your field. And at the end of that, you will be evaluated. And if your thesis is found to be of the highest quality and ethical standards, and you have shown that you contributed an original contribution, you will then get your academic degree, but also it continues beyond that in that it culminates in stewardship of the discipline, meaning that you will be the gatekeeper, the expert of your chosen discipline. And that's quite a responsible place to be. So remember, just to put it in bullets for you, it's a personal quality. It's a process that needs to demonstrate a level of competence. And you do that by having an original contribution to the body of knowledge, and then also through scholarship and stewardship of the discipline, you will become that person that is esteemed and not known in your discipline as having a doctorate. So quite a tall order, you might think. So if you thought it's just about doing a PhD and getting a degree, you will now realize that it involves much more than that. And I can promise you, after you have been awarded that doctoral degree, you will by far not be the same person as you were when you started off 4 years ago. Well, if you are, then I'd be worried. But I would venture that you would not be the same person as the person you were when you started off. And that's why you are often in high demand, because of the qualities that you have learned and the skills that you've learned and the critical thinking and problem solving that you've achieved at that level that can then be transposed or transferred to other aspects of your personal or your professional life. So when we look at the importance of doctorateness, there's 6 very important aspects. The one is that you demonstrate mastery and that you have a deep understanding of the subject matter, that you have an original contribution which adds new insight to existing knowledge or new knowledge, but there's very few things in the world that's new. So you would potentially create new insights. Then very important is your critical thinking, where you would be have an enhanced understanding and ability to analyze and critique. That there's professional development. It prepares you either for an academic career. However, not all PhDs decide to follow an academic career. But it would definitely, if you wanted to follow academic career, it would be your first point of entry. Then very, very important, as much as we have a unique contribution, that contribution goes together with quality. And that we speak of your rigor or your depth that ensures the thoroughness and the details of your research. So I always say, if you've been to my other sessions, I talk about, especially with the literature review, of GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. So if your reading, for instance, is on a superficial level, then the level of the rest of your doctorate might be compromised. If you weren't rigorous and ethical with conducting your research, then your findings or your results might not be trusted, and that might have an impact on your contribution. So I mentioned as well the ethical standard. You uphold the integrity and responsibility in the research. So it is about mastery, contribution, critical thinking, professional development, rigor, and upholding integrity and the ethics of your study. So it is much more than just writing a thesis. There's very, very important aspects, and one of these or the other can't be missing. They all need to be present in the journey of your doctorateness. I want to share with you an overview or a slide from the Council of Higher Education, the CHE. And they've just launched a very extensive report, and they are driving this doctoral graduate attributes in all higher education organizations, institutes, universities, as the key attribute that needs to be developed and delivered in a doctoral candidate and then a doctoral degree holder. The first attribute is that you exit with a broad knowledge, which is well informed and relevant in the selected field of your discipline. Through an original contribution is achieved through, very important, independent study. And the graduate integrates new with existing knowledge, in addition to being well informed about and well versed in the literature in a chosen field, and the graduate is able to make a contribution relevant to evolving debates in the field. So that's in terms of your broader knowledge base, but also in specialized knowledge, that you demonstrate that you are an expert specialized in in-depth current knowledge of a specific area of research, which will be evident in your thesis or the equivalent thereof. That you also demonstrate insight into related fields. So you must have an awareness of the specific area that your research relates to, and other fields of practice which could be evident in your doctoral work. As we've said before, your ethical awareness and compliance with the principles of ethics and research, as well as with professional ethics and integrity. Then we get to your original contribution, and that you show the evidence of original and innovative thinking in research, where applicable creative practices or performance which makes a special and a novel contribution to this field. That you've used appropriate methodologies, that you show knowledge of these, and that you use and evaluate the methodologies, instruments, and procedures appropriate for the doctoral work undertaken. Then you might be surprised that reflection and autonomy is within these attributes. And that means that you as the graduate demonstrates the ability to conceptualize and reflect critically, work independently, and arrive at defensible conclusions and solutions based on appropriate, substantiated, and developed defensible premises and analysis. So that reflection goes hand in hand with critical thinking. And the difference, when we talk about the difference between a master's and a doctoral level study, is exactly in that you will start moving to be an independent researcher. Quite something daunting if you're just starting your doctoral journey. And then very, very important, you can have all of these attributes, but if you can't write communicate all of your work and your contributions, then it might come to nothing. So your ability, your communication, and then also digital literary skills are critically important. So you need to demonstrate an advanced level of communicative competency through the capacity for rigorous academic writing, including relevant digital literary skills, and you can reference to other critical studies and debates in your research. So by the end of your doctoral studies, you would need to demonstrate all of these attributes, and somewhere in your thesis or your final document, these all need to be demonstrated because they will all be evaluated. So if you forget anything of what we are talking about this evening, but you remember these 8 attributes and that you know that you would consistently need to work on them until the very end and possibly beyond, it will stand you in good stead. So these attributes are very critical. Now, if you're starting to lose faith already and thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to do that? Remember, in the first slides, we said that it's a developmental and a transformative apprenticeship. So I don't expect at the end of your PhD that you, I would expect these attributes at the end. I'm not necessarily expecting them at the beginning yet, because you are on a developmental trajectory, but that you should achieve it in the next 4 to 5 years, or certainly before you submit your thesis for evaluation. So please don't always be so hard on yourself by saying, oh, I can't do this, I can't think that broad, I can't conceptualize, I can't. You're supposed to not be able to do it to that extent in the beginning, but you definitely need to show the ability to be able to do that as you progress through your PhD. So always remember, please be kind to yourself. Sometimes no one else will besides yourself. So let's just have a look at the key characteristics of doctoral level work. Originality, we've spoken about your contributions. The depth of your inquiry, and we'll talk about that a bit just now. So you will be exploring your subject matter or your topic in great detail. Your ability to critically analyze, evaluate, and critique are the very top of your thinking skills. Your methodological rigor, your research needs to be robust and appropriate design and methodology used. Your scholarly writing presents findings in academic language, and this is definitely on a very high level. Scholarly writing is also something that you weren't born with. So as much as people often say, oh, but I don't have English as a first language, I can tell you that no one has scholarly writing as a first language. Scholarly writing is something that you practice and develop over time, and you're never done with it. I still learn to write every day. And then definitely ethical conduct, upholding the high standards of your research ethics. So if we look at identifying the transition from a master's to a doctoral level thinking, you should be able to distinguish between a master's and doctoral level research, identify the challenges in making this transition, and apply strategies to develop doctoral level thinking. Now, when we think about our master's research, I think just by way of what we've talked about earlier, you can immediately, if you think about your master's research, that you would immediately realize that there's a steep difference. There is a greater depth, there's greater need for independence, there's greater need for critical thinking, and there's a greater need for a contribution. So the fundamental difference between a master's degree and a PhD is the purpose each of these qualifications serves. So a master's degree involves expanding your understanding of existing scholarship in a particular subject area. Now, to hold a master's degree, you needed to show that you can follow the research process. That's it. You needed to demonstrate that you could follow the research process and you would obtain your master's degree. And usually I find very, very few master's students are able to do that research independently. Definitely not any of my students. If very often our underpinning in an honours level is very superficial and it's a very small scale and holds very few credits. So even the jump from an honours to a master's level is often great. And I find that most of my students at that level are not able to do independent research. But the key aspect of a master's degree is that you can demonstrate you can follow the research process. But the purpose of a PhD is to make an original quality ethical contribution to your field or to the field of knowledge. So the difference then lies in the depth of the research. Your doctorate requires more extensive research. And I will talk about what it doesn't mean as well later on. The issue of originality, your demand for original contribution. Then we've spoken about the duration, that doctoral studies typically take longer. The scope is definitely broader. So you would often, with a master's study, you can have a maybe just South African perspective, but often a doctorate speaks to an international audience and your scope is often much broader, or your scope can be multidisciplinary, that straddles across disciplines. Supervision, you are expected, there's a greater level of independence expected in doctoral research. And I must say my doctoral students that just start off isn't quite there yet. But I would like to see as they develop and transform that they get to the stage where they are independent. And that independence is very, very critical when you need to defend your doctorate. If you are not independent, you will not be able to defend your thesis and really engage with it. I had quite an experience a few weeks ago with my students. I've got monthly family meetings, as we call it, much like Cyril Ramaphosa had family meetings during COVID. And I meet my students there, and I had a doctoral student who had just completed her studies, and I wanted her to just do a 5-minute presentation to the group in terms of what was her original contribution, which was developing a framework, a conceptual framework. And I knew she was very busy, and I said, I'll do the slides for her, I said a slide. And the evening when she presented, I brought up the conceptual framework, but the picture of the conceptual framework. And she said, but where are the slides? And I said, well, this is your contribution. And she says, but I need the slides to talk about this. And I thought I was at that stage very, very worried that that she had not internalized for some reason even her unique contribution, and she couldn't speak to it independently, that she still needed or dependent on slides. But she might have also just been nervous or any other reason, but your independence at the end is paramount, that you can speak confidently about your contributions, about your research, and that you've internalized and you are able to communicate that at the end. And then definitely the outcomes. Your doctorate aims for publishable impact results. So you will now see if you registered for your doctoral degree at UNISA after 2020, you are expected to publish 2 articles, not just submitted, they need to be published before you graduate. So remember, just a heads up to start with that process and don't wait until the very end. But you are welcome to attend the workshops on publishing your research. And if you don't have any idea how you could publish parts of your dissertation along the way, then please also attend those workshops. So some of the challenge we may experience in this transition is exactly that increased independence, where we have less guidance and we need to be more self-directed in our research. Now, that independence, I often find goes hand in hand with our ability to manage ourselves and to manage our time. So I often find the biggest stumbling block is that ability to manage our time on our own for the next 4 or 5 years, and be able to identify that self-directedness, that you know that you can set up goals, that you have them in measurable chunks, that you know exactly when you need to do what by when, because your supervisor is probably not going to tell you that. So your plan for the next 4 or 5 years would be self-directed as well, not just your research process. So time management for me is one of the critical skills that you can't only develop at the end. You need to develop those skills within the first month or 2. Then definitely the greater depth, navigating complex and in-depth research topics, or also just in-depth discussions and discourses. Very often I find on a master's level that we talk about our research. We can give you the concrete facts of our research, but very often on a master's level, we don't engage in the discourses of our topic or the arguments against it or for it. We're not quite there yet where we need to be when we are in our PhD. Oh yeah, time management does come up. Balancing your research, your writing, and other commitments. You must know that even if you study part-time, your PhD, I always say, is like a very jealous lover. Those of you who have been in love, you know that that lover or partner of yours is very jealous about the time we have together. They want to be on your radar the whole time. They demand your time. They demand when you think about them. When you plan around that important person that's on your periphery. So I often say that a PhD is a very, very jealous lover, and they extract and expect time. So you would need to make that a priority, and you also need to tell that your family and your friends that for the next few years your social engagements will be considerably less. You would need to spend at least 8 hours during the week, and at least, I would say, 10 to 16 hours during the weekend for the next number of years if you're working part-time to achieve this commitment. So you need to manage your time, but also manage balancing your academic responsibilities with your writing and with your social commitments and family commitments. Then your academic writing, I often find that that's sometimes the level of writing expected in a PhD takes some time to develop. So the mastering of scholarly language and presentation, but also scholarly argumentation and defense. And then very important, this imposter syndrome where you doubt yourself and you fear that you won't make it. And whenever you're in a room with the supervisors or other researchers or even other doctoral students, You might often think, oh my word, what am I doing here? What if other people realize that I don't actually know? What if they realize that I don't have all the answers, and I would feel such a failure, and I'm so scared that I'll be found out. Now, when those imposter syndrome thinking comes around, if you haven't already had them, then you need to tell yourself the words that I started with in the beginning. I was chosen because I have the ability to do it. I am developing, I am learning, and I have a right to be here. But I do acknowledge that in all aspects of your life, whether you start a new job, whether you start as a lecturer or move to a professor, that imposter syndrome very often comes up and has a lot of self-doubt around it, and we spend a lot of energy on it. So when those thoughts come up, tell the imposter, I don't have time. I can use my energy better than worrying and fearing failure. I am using my energy for something productive. Goodbye. Okay, I hope that will help when that imposter comes up. Now, developing a doctoral mindset and cultivating intellectual curiosity. You will see that most of my slides have 6 bullets with 6 words. And I do that very purposefully, that if you can internalize these 6 key points on every slide, that you should have an arsenal of getting you out of the blocks. So when we've spoken so much already about a doctoral mindset, a doctoral level of thinking, and then you might ask yourself, so how do I go about that? How do I cultivate that intellectual curiosity? Now, the first thing that a curious person does, even as a child, they ask questions. Why? Now, that curiosity as a doctoral student will be critical for you to cultivate it, but also sustain that curiosity. So ask questions, challenge assumptions, seek new answers. You might be wrong at times, or you might travel in a wrong direction, but you learn from that, and that's the thing. It's about learning. It's not about making mistakes. It's about learning. So even if you have failed or gone along a track that maybe wasn't the correct one or was less likely to be the chosen path, then ask yourself, so what could I have done different? How could I have known? How will I know next time? But please keep asking questions. Be a pest. When you read an article, you are now not going to read merely for the content. You are going to read each article with a clear question or questions in mind, and you will be asking questions of this article. You will be asking questions around the debates in your field. You will be asking questions about your methodology and what else and what more and what different. So you would need to read widely. People, that's one aspect that you can know. In other parts of the world, especially in Europe, you will not come across the saying that I'm studying for a PhD. You don't study for a PhD, you read for a PhD. So in Europe, you will say, I am in the process of reading for my PhD. And that would be your entire process in your doctoral degree. You are reading for a doctoral degree. You are not doing a doctoral degree. You will be reading, and I can tell you that you will be reading not only on your topic. You have to read about methodology. You have to read how to write. You might not think so, but you also have to read how to write so that you can practice how to write in an adequate academic standard. You need to read how other people write so that you can get the cues of how you would maybe want to write. You will need to engage in discussions, share ideas with others. This can be and often is a very, very lonely process. Please reach out. That's one of the reasons why I do the family meetings. I just realized I have about 24 students and I cannot support them all, for instance, emotionally when they're feeling down, but they can do that for each other. They can have discussions because they're all on PhD level, even if it's not the same topic. So please find a community with whom you can engage. And if you are studying online, which makes it often more difficult to find your academic kin. So have a look at blogs, at the internet, start a group, start a blog, subscribe to blogs. There's many academic blogs that you can subscribe to, have discussions about. But this is very, very important. You need to be able to share your ideas with others. I had such a smile. I have been working from home even before COVID. I was a professor working from home. So I've been kind of on my own for many, many years. And that was before and during COVID, and I'm now on sabbatical. So, and I started to feel quite lonely. My academic partners and publishers went in their own directions, and I started feeling very alone and that I didn't have anyone to talk with. And then I discovered ChatGPT. So for a while, ChatGPT became my discussion partner, and still at times is. So you can be creative around that as well. The very important next is the ability to embrace uncertainty. Accept that ambiguity is part of learning. They did a study in Australia a number of years ago, and they tried to identify what is the one skill that makes a doctoral candidate complete their studies or not. And it wasn't their intelligence. It wasn't their ability to argue. It wasn't their ability to write. The key thing that made doctoral candidates successfully complete was this ability to deal with ambiguity. Now, the ambiguity, you must understand, if you are going to make a unique contribution, you are making that. That contribution isn't out there yet. You will be the expert around that. You will drive the process around that. And because you're the first, just like the people landing on the moon, there is ambiguity, there is uncertainty, and that you need to embrace it. When you are in the doldrums or you really don't know and you feel stuck, then go and do something else. Go for a walk, go to the gym, play with your kids, play video games, do whatever you have to, but just let it rest for a bit, or go on to other chapters or aspects. And you know that your brain is an amazing thing. You might not think it or realize as you're reading all of these pages and research reports and articles, but all of that is food for your brain. And the amazing thing is that your brain makes links that you would never expect it making. But they don't make that links when you're under stress. That's why you will have these aha moments at 2 or 3 in the morning, because that's when your brain is resting and it has that ability to make links in terms of what you fed it. So garbage in, garbage out. Obviously, if you do high-level reading, you might have high-level ideas as well, but it doesn't work the other way around. So please accept the ambiguity. It is part of learning. It's part of the process. And I don't think you ever achieve in your life where you aren't ambiguous about something. You often think that your supervisor is the superhuman being that arrived and that knows everything, and that has published widely. But we are still dealing with ambiguity. Every time I just had an article that I submitted to a rated journal, and you often then, when you submitted it, you in fear of your emails to receive the letter. We regret if it starts with that. Thank you for your submission, but then I often just close it because I just I can't deal with the rest of the message. But this email came and they said it's not accepted for this journal, but is acceptable for another journal. Can we transfer it? Now, immediately there's an ambiguous process. Immediately I start with a self-doubt. Was it good enough? Will it be good enough? Am I good enough? So please remember that your research isn't a reflection on you as a person. When you get feedback, it's exactly that. It's feedback. It's not meant to you. It's about developing and getting to a better space. So also seek novelty, pursue new ideas and experiences. Often that's a risk. Take those risks. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised at yourself. You'll be surprised at your learning. And also know that that road to seek novelty means that you need to put yourself out there. It means that you often need to defend your ideas. So when you have new ideas, new experiences, and you realize, but this can work, then do your homework, do your reading, gather your evidence so that you can go to your supervisor or to the academic committee and say, I want to do this, but I can support it with this evidence. And you then stand your ground. But remember, you can't do that if you haven't done your own homework. Reflect regularly. Consider what you have learned and why. It's all about that. So reflection is such a critical aspect of your PhD, over and above doing the actual PhD. All right, let's move on. So cultivating a doctoral mindset, you should learn how to cultivate intellectual curiosity, embrace complexity, ambiguity, and develop critical analytical skills. So we've already spoken about much of that, but just as a recap, accept the uncertainty, explore multiple perspectives, consider new viewpoints, new interpretations, and also don't think that your subject area is the only area that can give you answers. Read broader. Read outside of your discipline. See if there is ideas broader than just where you are working and thinking at. Challenge simplification. Resist reducing complex ideas to cliches. We've spoken about the ambiguity, think critically. We've talked about questioning, but also question your assumptions, question the assumptions of others, question the assumptions around what you read and probe deeper, and adapt and learn. Adjust your understanding as needed. We often go in, especially when we've done our research proposal, and we have a certain understanding what we want to do, how we want to do it, and how we're going to go about. And then in our research process, we might discover that things aren't the way we thought, and then resist being resistant. Adjust your understanding, adjust your frame of mind to be able to learn and to incorporate your learning and to move on. So how do we think critically? Firstly, by questioning assumptions, challenge accepted ideas and beliefs, analyze arguments, evaluate logic and evidence presented. So you need to ask yourself, the conclusion that these authors have arrived, is there evidence supporting those? Is there evidence supporting the claims that they are making? And are they logical? Because when you can do it for others, you need to now implement it into your work because you are going to be evaluated for the same reason. So consider diverse perspectives, different viewpoints, different sources. Reflect on your biases, but also on societal biases. There's many, okay. Make informed decisions, and that's why I said base your conclusions on thorough analysis. So you can't reach a conclusion or make a statement if you don't have the analysis and don't have the evidence for those claims. So practice self-correction. Revise opinions in the light of evidence, and we've spoken to that. All right, the next slide, I just thought we might be midway through our journey, and I thought I might give you a 5-minute break, but I think we're steadily going to move on. But this 5-minute break isn't just something that I thought up or thought that it would be funny or different. You know that humans can only concentrate for 20 minutes. So when you are working, reading, or whatever you're doing, after 20 minutes, take a 10-minute break. So the 20-10 principle, 20 minutes focused reading or focused writing, 5-minute or 10-minute break. And you then stagger. So some people can work longer than others, but your concentration starts wandering after about 20 minutes. Okay, so all of you that's still online and that's still awake and focused, well done. So this aspect of tonight's discussion is possibly maybe the reason why you thought to attend tonight's presentation. And that's the aspect of the designing and implementing doctoral level research. So you should be able to understand the importance of robust research designs, be able to select appropriate methodologies, and ensure the rigor in your data collection and data analysis. So as I said before, there are a lot of sessions that specifically go into specific designs, whether they're quantitative, qualitative, mixed methods, specific approaches in each of those designs. And tonight is just to give you an overview of your thinking around your design and implementing of your research. So it is at this stage of your research design where you require critical thinking skills. This stage of your doctoral work provides a philosophical and a technical foundation from which you defend your thesis. So it's very important. We often talk about conceptualizing your research. Now, conceptualizing is about thinking. So your conceptualization of your research is a very, very important aspect and will often take you more or less 6 months to maybe a year to, for instance, complete your proposal. And that's how long conceptualizing your research might take. So when we conceptualize our research, just some ideas. I often try and use Kipling's 5 questions, or Kipling's 5 wise men. You might have heard of them. It's what, why, when, where, and how. Now we can take Kipling's 5 wise men and their question and ask about our research. So what is it that you want to discover? Why do you want to investigate it? When will this investigation take place? How do you intend to investigate this topic? How will you choose your paradigm? Where is the topic related and where is it to be investigated? Who are the respondents or your participants from whom data are collected? How will you analyze your data, for instance? And where to from here? And that often relates to your unique contribution. So try these Kipling's 5 hats of 5 wise men. We can say 5 wise people. I don't like the idea that it's only men. There's very wise other people as well. And so try and think about on a very, on a very simplistic basis before you start just reading and reading and reading. It's a very important aspect, but take some time and reflect, especially if you're stuck, and just go back to basics. And even if it is wherever you are in the process, maybe just take a minute and try and answer these basic questions. And then you can start your reading and see where it leads to and how you can incorporate that. So in terms of research designs and methodologies at the doctoral level, we've spoken about the ability to critically think about your topic, align your purpose to a PhD level. It's usually your unique contribution. Your objectives will be the steps that you action to achieve your purpose. Your research problem and questions will drive your design. And then very importantly, check your bias. So what I thought of, you might be a bit tired of my voice. I thought we can watch this short video, and that it will also be available for you. Hope the link works. And we'll just spend about 7 or 8 minutes with this gentleman.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Dr. Guy, author of The Dissertation Warrior and founder of the Dissertation Mentor Accelerator Program. And this is a shortened version of a longer masterclass that I offer in my flagship dissertation training program, the Dissertation Mentor Accelerator Program. So that's a lot of dissertations. So I'm really honored that you're here today, and I want to talk to you about how do you select your methodology for your doctoral dissertation. Where doctoral students often start this conversation is often in completely the wrong place. They often say, I'm a numbers person, so I'm going to do a quantitative study. Or they say, I am not a numbers person, so I'm going to do a qualitative study. Or they might say, I want the best of all worlds possible, so I'm going to do a mixed methods study. Where candidates really lose out in this part of the process is they don't realize that in the initial beginnings of their work, it's so easy to be swayed by your own personal biases and pay not attention to that which will give you the best basis for your study, for your doctoral study. And your best basis is actually the research, the literature. In the literature, there are recommendations for future research that will actually tell you what methodology you should select. In addition to that, there are norms within your doctoral program that should be considered as you go and start considering your methodology. So what is a methodology anyways? Well, essentially a methodology is the process by which you collect, you gather, and then you analyze all your data. And we typically categorize these methodologies into families like quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods. Within each of those, there are more specific names by which you might call your individual research design. Some common ones that you've heard of before are case study, narrative, ethnography. You might have a statistical type model like a quantitative ex post facto study of some kind. There are many different forms of research that you could choose. But generally speaking, research designs come in families. We have a quantitative family, we have a qualitative family, and we have this mixed methods, which is just simply a mixture of both a quantitative design that you've selected and then a qualitative design that you've selected. How then should you choose your methodology? When you go and you speak to your doctoral committee, your dissertation chair, and your committee members, you're going to have to show that your chosen methodology is justified and it's appropriate. It's justified in that other researchers are recommending that we use this methodology to go and research that researchable problem in which you're interested in. And it should be appropriate also in that it actually could help you finish the aims of your study. So how should you then go about selecting your methodology? Well, the first step is to find the 25, 30, or even 50 most recent dissertations from your doctoral program, because your doctoral program is the place that you'd like to start, that you should start. Look at what are the norms of my doctoral program. Are most studies from my doctoral program quantitative? Are most of them qualitative? And if so, what forms of those quantitative and qualitative studies are being supported in my doctoral program? It's possible that you're going to find that your doctoral program has a bias as far as what types of studies it allows through. So that should be the first step as you're considering your methodology. The second step that you should consider is, what is the research recommending? What recommendations for future research are out there that are asking you to pursue a specific type of methodology? You know, when you go to your chair initially, as I said in one of my more recent videos, it can be really tempting to bring your own biases, your own justifications as to why you should conduct your study. But notice how different it feels and within, and also how different it sounds, how it would sound to your chair when you bring the most thought through, most justified reason for doing this, which is that the literature is telling us to do so, that recent research is saying that this study that I'm about to do is recommended as future research. You're doing what the researchers are asking us to do. That is the gold that you're looking for as you're undertaking your literature search. And in fact, that's the third thing that you should be doing. As you're doing your great literature search, you should be cataloging the purpose statements, the research designs used, and even the research questions of each one of the studies that you encounter, such that you can start understanding the patterns that are emerging, whether it's a quantitative study or qualitative study and so on. You can see how those are laid out, how those are put together. So that way you can model those best practices in your study. So often a common question I get is, Dr. Guy, have I chosen the right methodology for my study? There's a few ways that you can know. If you've already made this decision, there's a few ways that you can make sure that you've chosen the right one. First of all, yours should fit the norm of your doctoral program. It should absolutely be one that other dissertations have done in your program in the recent past. Number two, the research should be asking us to go do the study that you're planning on doing, or at least something really close to it. Further, you should have in your possession a pretty lengthy list of other purpose statements and other methodologies and other research questions from other studies throughout the literature, so that way you can base your own off of the best norms out there in the wider research world. And finally, you should have a great research book or research manual in your possession for the specific type of methodology that you're planning on pursuing, so that way your process is guided by the best advice, just not simply your own feelings of what you should be doing. I'm Dr. Guy, and I run the world's most comprehensive online dissertation training for doctoral.
Okay, I think that's enough of Dr. Guy and his suggestions. Now, when you maybe critically, or when you listen critically to his suggestions, there's some ideas that you might agree with, and I would happy to hear if there's some ideas that you don't agree with. So although it is a good idea to see what is being done in your program, it could definitely be a point of departure. But remember earlier I said to take risks, to be innovative, to be new, to be different. And so I also say that if you feel that you have something novel, or a novel a design, or a novel way of going about the research, or a novel theories, for instance, that you are combining that may suggest certain designs or methodologies, then go for it. I keep on saying that as long as you can defend it with quality evidence and justify your choices, then you are the driver of your ship. I'm not saying don't take into consideration what's being done. I'm not saying you should ignore the advice of your supervisor or the committees, but you can also make up your mind. And the way that you do make up your mind is exactly what he said, is to read widely. Now, I would suggest, other than the 20 dissertations that's recently been published in your discipline, and there's easy access for you in terms of the university's repositories where all the M&Ds are reposited. They are often not published, so you could, take on articles, but very important to go onto the repositories of different universities and see what has been done on doctoral basis and what are the recommendations. So I agree with Dr. Guy in terms of that. When you read an article, look what is their recommendations for future research. Often they would recommend a specific design, or they would recommend a gap that they've identified to go further. So it's very useful to read the last bit of an article or a PhD to identify potential gaps. And then you can decide what is the best way to go about. So the gaps that you identify through reading, whether it's literature or books, is your gap can be on multiple levels. So you can identify gaps in literature in terms of knowledge gaps. You can identify practice gaps. You can identify methodological gaps. You can identify theoretical gaps. You can, in your study, address all of those types of gaps. Now, when we talk about a contribution, if you haven't identified the gaps, then you can't have a contribution. I hope that you can follow my argument. Without a gap, how are you going to contribute? Without establishing a gap, how are you going to contribute to the body of knowledge? There's two levels of contributions. This is one level. One level of contributions is that you address one or more of these gaps in your study. But that you also, I agree with him, that when you have a tentative idea what you might want, or what approach you might want to follow, quantitative, qualitative, mixed methods is very broad. There's a lot of approaches under each of those. Is to buy the most recent edition of the expert or an expert in the field. So, for instance, if you wanted to do qualitative studies, Creswell is probably one of the gurus in qualitative research. And his books might give you a broad overview. So in his book about the 5 approaches to qualitative research, he'll tell you there's grounded theory, there's ethnography, case studies and the like. But if you decide, for instance, I want to follow a grounded theory approach, then get the grounded theory, a grounded theory approach from whoever is the guru in grounded theory or was the guru. So, for instance, in grounded theory, if you're following a constructivist approach, it would be Kathy Shammas. And, I would expect then that my doctoral candidate has these ebooks, or whether you actually physically borrow them from the library or do whatever you need to do. But you need to have access to those thought leaders in that specific design and approach. And then definitely you need to augment that with methodological and design articles and discourses within that discipline or within that approach. So always have your most recent edition of the thought leaders in terms of your design, and have the most recent discussions around that so that you can place yourself within those discussions or approaches.
Students.
So we talked about the literature and finding gaps. So if you do a comprehensive literature review, you thoroughly read and analyze existing literature. So remember, you're not just reading for the sake of reading. You're now reading by analyzing and critiquing and evaluating each article, and also reading for gaps. So as you read, look for unanswered questions. Look for questions that's left unresolved. What I don't agree with the video that we just said is, I would look for contradictory findings. I would look for what has not been said. So you can also look for a gap in terms of what is said, but also what is literature, for instance, silent about. What are contradictory findings, and identify inconsistencies or disagreements in research, and you might put yourself there. Under research areas, find a topic or a perspective that's not adequately covered, or a topic which a certain aspect isn't looked at, or you might find a different theoretical lens to look at that aspect specifically. That's why I say, please augment anything in your design and your methodology with the recent, I mean not older than 5 years. When we talk about methodology books, also not older, look for the latest edition. Now, for instance, in the Kathy Sharma's Grounded Theory book that I referred to, it's a 2014 edition, and Kathy Sharma has passed away. So there were some articles that were published after. She passed away last year, not in 2014, but she didn't update her book. So that's the latest book. But you can augment it with current literature about the current discourses around the data and the methods. And then the application gaps. Discover areas where the theory isn't applied. So novel lenses, where and what has it been used for, where has it been used, and maybe in your field. That can be where your unique contribution lies. So you would gather by now that, when we just maybe spoke about earlier on the depth, you will now discover that your reading is on a different level and requires a lot of depth, a lot of analysis, a lot of critical thinking to identify where you're going to situate yourself, not just in your topic, but also in your methodology. So what I want you to know, that a PhD is not about doing more than what you did in your master's in related to data. Many times I find a PhD candidate that says, I'm going to do 60 interviews with participants. And I ask them, why 60? And they would say, no, in my master's study, I only did 10. And now I'm going to do, for my doctoral, I'm going to do 60. That's not on doctoral level. So it doesn't mean more data makes it a doctoral study. It doesn't mean if you use a mixed method that's on the level of a doctoral study. It's what you do with the data that leads to a new contribution. So, for instance, you have collected your data, whether it's qual, mixed methods. I will always tell my students, you're now halfway, because that's exactly what you did with your master's. You collected data, you analyzed it, and you wrote up your findings. So if you're at that stage with your PhD, you're halfway. So it is what you do with the data that leads to new contributions. So a contribution could be, as we said, when you fill certain gaps in knowledge, practice, or so a gaps related contribution. Or it can be that, my students all develop either based on the findings, a model, a program, strategies, guidelines, but in that their unique contribution lies. In that there is a new model, a new program, a new strategy, a new guideline that's being presented. So, but it differs for different disciplines. So please find out from your supervisor or in your discipline or in your program what usually a unique contribution consists of. Some people might look at it differently. So I just want to spend some time in understanding the concept of original contribution. So original contribution can be new knowledge that contributes to novel insights or discoveries. Now, I must say, as I said previously, new knowledge, to find new knowledge is, sure, there's very little new in the world. So I don't often think we get to that unless you're a Nobel Prize winner, you might want to claim new knowledge. But we can contribute to a better understanding or a new way of understanding or additional aspects of our understanding. Then we can have innovative methods, introduces new improved research techniques. We can have fresh perspectives where we offer unique interpretation of existing data. We can have practical application where we propose new uses for existing knowledge. We can have theory development, advances or refines theoretical frameworks, and that's where I just showed you where you can develop models, theoretical frameworks. Sometimes my students take it further. They've developed a theoretical framework, and based on that, they develop guidelines as well, for instance. Or your unique contribution could be in policy influence, that your research then informs and changes policy direction. But then you must have the ability to have access to the policy decision makers, that there is uptake for your influence and your ideas to actually action that. So often we dream about a policy influence, but it never actually gets to policy influence. So if you want to go that route, please make sure that you have access to the gatekeepers and the people that can actually talk to policies and influence those. So just in terms of reading, there's a lovely article by Muhammad Shaheen on the concept of originality in academic research. It's in the engineering field, but it is a lovely article to have a look at in terms of contributions and how you could go about those. So if you do get the slides or get a link to the slides, if you double click on this article, the actual article will open for you. If not, if you want to paste this in your search, on Google, it's free access, and it will take you to the article. So I don't want to go through the second video for you. I've just put it in there that you can go through it in your own time. And it is more for those of you that are looking to follow a quantitative research area or a decision to make use of those methods, but it's worth watching as well. It's just a bit too longer to watch with you this evening. Then we spoke about the unique contribution, but we also spoke about quality, and that's ensuring the quality of your data collection analysis, also a few other quality aspects, but you can imagine that if you can't ensure the rigor of your data and your analysis, then your unique contribution might also be flawed. So we want to make sure that we have the best data and that it's analyzed in the most accurate way and also then interpreted not in the right way, but that it's the best interpretation possible. Or then give alternatives for alternative interpretations. So in order to ensure that, you have to have a clear methodology that define and follow a robust process. And that's why you need your methodology books for. That you have developed reliable instruments, that you use validated tools for data collection, or if you've modified that you've piloted those, or if you're using a current tool that you've got permission, for instance, to use that. Very important, you can use data triangulation using multiple sources to confirm your findings, and that's often why people say they're choosing a mixed methods. But as I said before, more isn't necessarily better. If you don't have a justification for why a mixed method is better for you, then that isn't the right decision. Just thinking of doing, oh, well, it's a PhD, I need to do more thinking. The more methods I use, the more it's a doctoral study. It's not the truth. Your chosen design is about choosing what would best answer your research question and the purpose of your research, not about, well, everything, the new thing is to do a multi-method study, and that's going to ensure that it's more rigorous. It's not the case. If multi-methods doesn't work for you, or doesn't improve, or doesn't answer your research question, then it's not necessarily the design to go for. If you can equally answer your research question with a qualitative design or with a quantitative, mixing them doesn't, in essence, necessarily make it better. It might give us different perspectives or help us answer different questions and augment each other. But it doesn't necessarily mean that all PhDs need to use multiple sources, or that multiple sources mean that you have a multiple method study, or a mixed method, rather say that. So please, there's a difference between a mixed method and multiple methods. But the biggest thing is that if you do have it, that's fine. You know, the triangulation does improve the credibility of your study if it has a purpose. But you also can triangulate in other ways. You can triangulate. So triangulation simply means more than one. So you can have more than one theoretical perspective. You can have more than one data collection method. So you could, for instance, have interviews, observations, drawings. Those would be multiple data collection methods, which can then also improve your triangulation. So triangulation isn't just having a mixed method study per se. Also remember that if you do a mixed method, the true hallmark of a mixed methods, mixed method study is that there is an integration at some stage of the two findings. Qualitative quant at some stage needs to be integrated. If there's no integration, then it's not a true mixed method study. Then you should rather maybe go for a multi-method study. Okay, transparency. You need to be able to show an audit trail where if someone wants to check your study or wants to audit your study, that all your decisions are made and that you have how you made them, that they are justifiable, and that you have evidence of them. To critically analyze, evaluate your data objectively and thoroughly. Now, we might have a problem with objectively if you're a qualitative researcher, because that's inherently subjective, but that you build in measures to improve the chances of bias or the subjectivity. And then consistent checks. Regularly review and validate your work. It's good to present at colloquiums, for instance, because there you can get validation, or you can get feedback, or you can get suggestions. So if there is a possibility or a chance of you, please don't back off. Use them. I know they're scary, and I know it's very scary if you need to present in front of an audience of supervisors and professors, but please make use of those opportunities because you get feedback. And that's so critically important. You always look for feedback. All right, don't be scared of feedback. Then we are getting to the last aspect, and that's the developing your doctoral level writing skills. And the reason why I say this is so critical, you could have done the best research, you could have had the best proposal, you could have had actioned your research rigorously, ethically. It's of a high quality. It's amazing. But if you can't write it up, then it doesn't mean anything. So you could have had these amazing results, but if you're not able to write it up, and that you show the full robustness of what you did, that you can eloquently tell the reader about your findings, how you went about it, then it's of no use. So as we said earlier on, your communication techniques, it's not just about talking about your research, but most importantly and foremost, it's about your writing skills. And you should learn the characteristics of doctoral level writing and apply strategies for effective academic writing. You should also understand the importance of regular writing and feedback. So your writing phase, and writing is not at the end. It's embedded in everything from the first thought. And your writing task deserves as much attention as the research itself. So if your research up to collecting and analyzing your data took you 2 years, you should have invested 2 years in the writing itself of your thesis. Something else that the guy mentioned, he talks about a doctoral dissertation. It's a doctoral thesis. A dissertation is on master's level. Just thinking about that again. So the ability to scientifically write well is a skill that you have to develop, and that's one skill that you can only develop by reading and writing. It's not a skill that you can develop just about reading about writing. It's one of those skills that you get better at as you do it. So your doctoral writing defines novelty. So clearly state what's new or unique. Highlight value, explain the importance of your findings. Contextualize, show how your work fits within existing research. Address gaps, demonstrate how your research fills the knowledge gap. Discuss the implications, explain the potential impact on theory or practice. And then I would add your unique contribution to be able to communicate that unique contribution of your study. So at the very least, those. So your actual writing, these 6 things to remember aspects, the clarity, ideas, you need to express your ideas clearly and concisely. Sure, the writing concisely is quite a trick. I just sometimes put students writing or just aspects of their writing through ChatGPT and ask it to act as a critical reader or as a writing coach and give them feedback. And what comes up consistently is that they are not writing concisely and clearly. So it's a skill that you develop. Being very verbose and just filling pages and pages, remember your examiner needs to read it. And if your examiner gets bored, because you are just reeling out words, they become tired. As they become tired and bored, they become subjective. So please don't make your examiner, who is the reader of your thesis, tired or bored, because we don't want that. So keep your writing clearly and concisely. Precision, be specific and accurately use your language. Complexity, engage with intricate ideas and arguments. Criticality, demonstrate your ability to critique and analyze. Cohesion, your ideas are logically connected and flows smoothly. And then very important, referencing, proper citation and referencing of sources. And on a doctoral level, you have to use referencing software. The days are long gone where you did manual referencing. Please use referencing software. Please go to library training and learn how to reference and use referencing software. You can imagine by the end of a dissertation, you might have read about 4,000 pieces, articles, books. You might have cited about 200 of those. You can imagine if something is missing or you can't find a citation, the time it will take to find it and correct it. And if you have to do that for 100 citations, it eats up your time that you could have spent very differently. So please, please, referencing is not a skill. It's something that you can do adequately from the very first day. And please make sure that you can do that from the very first day. There is no excuse for messy referencing of citations. So that's one of the referencing. UNISA follows a revised Harvard, but each school and departments often have their own preferred referencing citation that they prefer. For psychology, might use APA. In health studies, we use a revised Harvard. That's a revised of a revised. But find out from your faculty or from your department which referencing system they use, and please use it and use it consistently. So if you ever use or you get feedback on your referencing that's not proper, then it's really shame on you. Because that's something that you can get right from the beginning, and I am quite anal about that. And then tips on writing cohesively. So you might say, oh, okay, you say write cohesively, but I don't know how to do that. The first thing about cohesive writing is about the logical flow of ideas in a logical sequence. I often still advocate using things like mind maps. Can be either digital one, or if you want to do it on pen and paper or with post-it notes. I find that it's better to organize your ideas on pen and paper or in a diagram or a mind map, and to move ideas in their logical sequence in that way, and then starting to write it up. It's sometimes you really mess with the coherence and logical flow if you start copying and pasting text and copy and paste it in different places. That's one of the ways where you easily lose logical sequence and coherence. Transition words, use transitions to connect thoughts. So good writing practice is that you have one paragraph for one thought. That doesn't mean you have one paragraph, one author that you refer to, but that is a comprehensive theme in a paragraph, a comprehensive theme in the next paragraph, and then you need to have transition and connections between the two paragraphs. Please don't worry about everything that I tell you, that after I've given you these hints, you say, I still don't know what's a transitioning sentence, for instance. I have an extended list of books and also courses that you can follow. And that's for free. And I'll give you those resources. All right, but just to make you aware, these are the most common mistakes that I pick up. Topic sentence, so that's what I referred to. You'll start your paragraph with a clear topic sentence, and that paragraph speaks to that topic. Then don't go wandering around and speak about everything and anything else. Each paragraph has a specific topic and a specific thought, and then you start connecting those paragraphs and thoughts with transition sentences. A consistent tense, maintain a consistent verb tense throughout. Often we say that in a proposal we use a future tense because this is what we're going to do. But when you start writing up your thesis, it's usually in past tense because you are reporting on how you did actions and how you actioned your research. So sometimes you could have a future tense for your chapter 1, which is an orientation to the study, but the rest of your chapters you're reporting on, and then a past tense is best. Conciseness, avoid unnecessary words or repetition. Please, something that can help you with your writing is Grammarly. There's a free edition. You can use it as a plugin in your Word. It can plug into your emails. But that for me, for my students, is the first level of checking your writing. And it's a free app that you can plug into your Word documents. So that you also learn through that. It doesn't just correct your writing, but it also tells you what is wrong with it, and then it gives you suggestions. All right. And then paragraph linking to create a narrative. So your whole thesis is a story. And you want to present it to the reader as a story so that they can enjoy reading it and not sit in a corner and scream when they read your thesis. All right. So strategies for effective academic writing. Please plan ahead. Outline your ideas before you start. Clear structure, organize your work into sections. Critically analyze and evaluate your sources, your arguments. Use precise language. Proofread. People, please proofread before you send any work to your supervisor. Good idea to have a critical reader as well, someone who isn't involved, because eventually you don't see the obvious mistakes. But please proofread or put it through a proofreader and regularly revise your work and then cite correctly. We've spoken about it in the previous slide as well. And then very important, we've touched on issues of feedback, but it's your regular writing and submitting your writing regularly gets you feedback, and the feedback helps you to develop your skills. It also helps you track and monitor your progress. It helps you to, as you write, refine your ideas. There's value in feedback. I know feedback is something we don't like, and it often stems from our childhood. But change your bias to feedback. Tell yourself, might be difficult. Sometimes people give feedback better than others. There are always nasty people that don't know how to give feedback, but there are many people that give very constructive feedback and have those in your area so that you can make use of them. Also, regular feedback helps you to detect errors and catch mistakes early, and it also provides accountability so that there's regular updates and that keeps you on track. So please set up a schedule from the beginning when you'll be doing what. Break it down into weeks or months, not more than that. Decide by this end of this 3 months, I need to achieve this. Then break it down into weeks and stick to your schedule. That's the only way you're going to stay on track. All right, so just the last hint, don't first try to get it right. Get it written, because until it's on paper, no one can help you get it right. You find out your thinking through your writing. So often when I read students' work or even other people's work and it's messy writing, I already know their thoughts are messy and not sorted. So please get your thoughts on paper, sort it out on paper, and revise your writing, because if your writing is messy, good chance your thoughts were messy. And drafting helps you clarify your thoughts. As you draft, other bits become clear, or you might make other connections. and drafting reveals the right places where it isn't right yet in ways that nothing else will do. So the bottom line is you need to write. You need to read, you need to write. You need to read, you need to write. You need to write, you need to read. And those are the two skills that you will be using for the next 4 years. So reading, writing, thinking, and the circle continues and is iterative. So I mentioned some sources for you, and these are mostly LinkedIn links. Some will take you to other sources as well, but there are a few free websites where you can master the art of academic writing. So there's strategies on writing academically, there's an online writing lab. There is Never Run Out of Phrases. It provides you with phraseology, the nuts and bolts for writing, a short guide to signposting in essays, academic writing, a practical guide, a guide on to how to avoid plagiarism. You can also find guidelines on the UNISA library, advice for writing in the sciences. There's a Harvard free source. So I'm sure that with the reading list that I'm about to give you and these free websites, that you will be able to get on the way. So final thoughts and encouragement from my side. Persistence pays. Keep going even when it's tough. Embrace challenges. They're opportunities for growth and learning. Value feedback. It's a tool for improvement, not criticism. Very important. Celebrate your progress. Every step forward is an achievement. People, if we don't celebrate our small achievements, 4 or 5 years to only celebrate when we have our PhD is just cruel. So please celebrate your progress. Celebrate your progress if you've achieved the outcomes you set for yourself that week or that month. Celebrate when you have your research proposal accepted. Celebrate when you have ethical clearance. Celebrate when you have gatekeeper permission. Celebrate when you've collected your first set of data. Celebrate when you've analyzed it. So please make every step along the way a celebration in small. Don't just wait for the day that you graduate. Okay. Stay curious, keep questioning, exploring and discovering. And most of all, believe in yourself. You do have the skills and the abilities to succeed. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in a PhD program. Okay, so in conclusion, just to recap, we explored the key aspect of doctorateness. We looked at transitioning and moving from a master's to a doctoral level and the challenges. We looked at our mindset and developing a doctoral mindset. We looked at research, robust research design and methodologies that are essential. We talked about your contribution. Your work should contribute to existing knowledge. Writing, mastering doctoral level writing is essential. And then just remember, this is a journey. It's challenging, but immensely rewarding. Keep learning, stay curious, and believe in your ability to contribute valuable knowledge to your field. With that, that's most of our presentations. I promised you a reading list. So I thought I'll also just take a snapshot of what my desk currently looks like. And if you really zoom in on the picture, you might find some very interesting items there. So there's also things for fun, and you might then wonder how I distract myself. But the references for all the books that you see in the picture, there's your reading list, and in most cases, it's the most up-to-date editions. And this could help you in your dissertation, thinking with theory, structuring your thesis. Latergan is a very good book to just get going. Then completing your thesis or dissertation, writing research critically, and then stepping stones to achieve your doctorate by focusing on your viva from the start. Okay, so those sources should give you good building blocks and ideas if you need to get some more ideas on how to paste and go ahead with your doctoral studies. Okay, so I'm going to put up 3 questions that you can think about or respond to in the question and answer section, but you are not limited to these. So if you can think about what specific challenges have you faced in transitioning to a doctoral level thinking. Okay, so we're not just talking about the doctoral level per se, but into doctoral level thinking. How have you approached developing critical thinking skills in your research? These might be tips for your fellow travelers. What strategies have you used to cultivate intellectual curiosity in your work? So these are meant to also just be signposts and tips that maybe others can also learn from you. And then as well, you are more than welcome to have other questions and answers. So I'm just going to go back to the question and answer section and just give me a moment or two so that those can just load for me. Just waiting for them to load. But in the meantime, you are more than welcome to start if you haven't already, to post your questions. All right, and then let's see what we have here. Okay, so is it possible to get guidance from other persons other than your supervisor? If yes, how is it possible at UNISA, especially where someone has only one supervisor? Now, this is a should I say, not political in the terms that we understand politics, but this can be a contentious issue. So for some supervisors, they would be unhappy if they found out that there is someone on the sideline assisting you. Others might say, you know, it takes a community to prepare a doctoral student, and that they don't have a problem. If you, and your question possibly arises from the fact that you might have a supervisor who is new or who is maybe not that experienced, and you might find that there's a need for that. But there isn't a clear and fast answer to that. If you want to use outside people, there's no hard and fast rule to say you can't. I mean, you would use guidance from other people in terms of, for instance, for statistical analysis or for co-analyzing or guidance for your writing. But remember, your supervisor is still the one taking responsibility for your study. So if you do incorporate other people, I don't generally have a problem with it. You know, if we share the same values, the same thinking, do whatever it takes to help you. But some supervisors might be very sensitive towards that, so you need to know how to broker it. So thank you, Prof. In pursuit of the doctoral graduate attributes toward the research studies true north, doctorateness, where is room for simplicity in this complex endeavor that we so much want to conquer? Very good question, I said, Checho. This is now a doctoral level question. I really like your question. Where is room for simplicity? Sure, I think there is, throughout the process, room for simplicity. Although it's a complex endeavor and it requires higher order thinking, your research process is pretty simplistic. A research process is exactly what you did on a master's level. if you do it rigorously and follow your design and your approaches, that doesn't need to be so daunting. So there is a complexity in when you initially, for instance, think about a topic and your conceptualization. That's a complex process. Eventually, if you've done it enough, it might become a simple process. The same with your data analysis and writing. So I think there's also simplicity in how we think about it. You know, if you think about it as something to enjoy, then it might also make the process more simplistic. If you accept the fact that there are going to be up and downs, then when there are up and downs, it's not such a huge issue. I always have one very simple thought, and I have it on every aspect of my life, is that too or this too shall pass. A very simple truth. This too will pass. Whether it's good or whether it's bad, it will pass. So, you know, there's different levels where you can adjust your thinking. You know, if I'm quite deeply involved on a philosophical level with my publications and reading, and it's hard work. It really is hard work to engage with difficult text. But you know what? Even if I'm in the doldrums and I don't understand what they're writing, I tell myself that it will pass. They will come to a stage where it's easier. Okay, so that's been a hard sermon, but a long sermon, but very, very good question. Thank you. How do you determine if something is a contribution? You determine, first of all, if it's been a gap and if you can contribute to filling that gaps. That would be your contribution. I would like to appreciate this presentation. Really, it gives me direction, particularly in the transition from master's to PhD until I become familiarized in the overall PhD scenario. So any technique you kindly advise me to cope with the transition gaps. Thanks a lot. Okay, great. A thesis is a result of extensive reading. So what you present is a result of extensive knowledge. How then is this originality measured? Your originality is measured as, yes, it's based on, I often say that your extensive reading gives you the foundation similar to when you build a house. That reading and extensive reading gives you the foundation. How you build your house, that's where your unique contribution lies. Okay, and that's where you have your originality situated. I'm sorry if my question may be out of the presentation, not to worry, but I wish to know the difference between a doctoral degree offered by a NISA, such as a Doctor of Law in a specific area, Doctor of Philosophy, and Doctor of Philosophy in Law. Now, you've got it quite right. If you just have a look at the word where you situated philosophy. A Doctor of Philosophy, you will often find that that degree is grounded on a more philosophical basis, more theory-based. I'm saying more, I'm not saying the others aren't, but it often has, that's the ish, is the part of the philosophy, where a doctoral degree in law, a Doctor of Law, for instance, has very often, it works the same way, it has the same, it goes the same route, nothing in the process is different, but it often has a more practical application and a less philosophical stance to it. So although it's very difficult at times to see the difference when you read the dissertations and they look exactly the same. But the difference is in that word philosophy, in terms of how it is argued and situated in. What is the difference between a dissertation and a thesis internationally? There shouldn't be a difference. A dissertation is a master's dissertation. Usually it's on an NQF level 9 in South Africa. A thesis is on a doctoral level, South Africa level 10. But our degrees and the quality of our degrees is audited. So for all good purposes, they should stand with any other international qualification, because there is a quality assurance process in it. So having a PhD from UNISA is the same as having a PhD from any university, whether it's local or international. The same criteria, evaluation criteria is used. Advocate Nshalabo, I wonder if I haven't seen you somewhere else. Having identified the gap, the question is the depth and the breadth of the elimination process for better focus. Please share wisdom on the funnel approach. Now, there's different areas of funneling. You can definitely funnel from your topic and refine. You might initially have a very, very broad topic, and as you read, you refine until you have a topic that you feel that is worth investigating, that you've identified through broad reading, and that you have identified potential in ongoing reading, specific gaps. So that's already, from reading broadly to identifying gaps in research, is already funneling. So from your reading, you might develop themes. You might then start identifying certain patterns. From that, you might identify gaps. So most of your where you start off with your PhD, from your conceptualization through to the actual end, is a funneling approach by itself. Hope that answers you to some extent. How many samples generally constitute a representative sample and saturation level? I might wonder where this comes from. So if you are you're using two concepts that's aligned to different paradigms and to two different designs. So a representative sample is more in a quantitative study, and saturation is more in a qualitative study. So your representativeness, you can calculate in a quantitative study what size your sample might be, but in a qualitative study, you might want to decide whether, usually we can't, the studies in qualitative is too small to have a representative sample. But we do use saturation, and then saturation, if we're using interviews, is when you keep on doing interviews and there's no new information coming to the fore, or information is repeated. Now that might happen if you're doing interviews by about interview number 8. We usually do 2 or 3 extra just to make sure there's nothing new emerging. So in a qualitative study, you might reach saturations with quite a small amount of data. And yeah, if you're doing focus groups, 3 or 4 might also give you saturation. So, but you're speaking into two paradigms here. To what degree does data triangulation imply a mixed methods approach, if it's not all about mixed methods, or mixing, I guess, about mixing methods? So data triangulation, remember, in mixed methods, we say that the outcome of that is to integrate, and that the findings of the two methods would then give us a clearer answer. So your mixed methods can be that one phase, quantitative or qualitative, informs the next phase, and that could be a mixed method approach, or mixing methods, not necessarily a mixed methods design. So remember, with mixed methods design, then there is integration at some stage. So data triangulation, be careful of the use of words, whether you are just using, say, for instance, focus groups and interviews doesn't necessarily make a mixed methods approach or a mixed methods design. Okay, so please also read further on that, or there's quite a lot of training going on those as well. The point of using validated tools for data collection, to what extent would a human error in the questionnaire design lead to a dissertation being failed as a result of that error, even if the error is explained as a limitation? Now, you've already answered yourself. Please don't think that all research went perfect all the time. If you do say that, then I don't believe you. I do believe in transparency. So if there were items missed, you're quite right. I encourage my students to be open about it. We talked about transparencies, and then you mention it in your limitation. You will not be failed because of that. I would rather applaud you for being open about it, and that could then also be a warning or heed advice for the next person that might want to use your research. So I knew this would come up. Wouldn't using Grammarly lead to Turnitin dictate it as an AI usage in the report? No. What is UNISA's policy on the usage of AI tools? I don't have it yet. Yeah. So Grammarly is simply a language tool that helps you to identify language and spelling errors. So no, using Grammarly will not, it might actually help improve your similarity index. So no, it won't be picked up as Turnitin. Yeah, as I said, UNISA's policy isn't there yet. My policy is that that's my personal policy. If you use it responsibly. If you use ChatGPT, the free version 3, then it might be picked up by Turnitin. Yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but ChatGPT version 3 might be picked up. You can read more into that and into what I'm telling you. Thank you for this session. It motivates us to know more about the path ahead. You're welcome. Sometimes you find that you have a new supervisor who has not supervised students before. So it really becomes difficult to look at prior work or thesis, which might not be supervised by him. Look, it's not about which thesis or dissertations the supervisor supervised. It's about the, for instance, in your field of study or in your discipline. It doesn't need to be theses that this supervisor oversaw. All right, so there's other challenges if they maybe not experienced, but you don't necessarily have to look at studies that they previously supervised. It can be in the wider community. Okay, Marcel, my challenge so far has been that I've chosen a topic that I'm really interested in, but that I don't have much knowledge about. So I've had to conduct a lot of reading to catch up. And this has been a wonderful period and I've learned, but it's also been stressful, I'm sure. I've really enjoyed the reading, but I've procrastinated with the writing. So your presentation have encouraged me to start with the writing, so I'm really appreciative. You're very welcome, Marcel. It's get writing, and you'll find that all the reading that you've done will come to good stead somewhere along the line. If you think maybe up to now it hasn't, I promise you it will be to your benefit somewhere along the line. Well done for reading so widely. And that's something else, I often tell my students, make sure that there's a gap in knowledge in the discipline, that it's not your gap in knowledge. So often we think, oh, I want to study this because I don't know ABC. Now you might find your answer just by doing a literature review. All right, so make sure that there's a knowledge gap in the discipline on the body of knowledge, that it's not your personal knowledge gap. So good again for you, Marcel, because you've clarified that. Itimaling, facing, transitioning. Oops, I'm just so sorry. We started with load shedding, so I'm quick. I should be okay. But let's just start wrapping up. Okay, so that's just the thanks. Rework your transitioning, thanks. Okay, good. Do be saying that, yes, we become despondent, but it's part of the process, and remember, it will pass. It's an excellent way of revision. Thank you very much. We learn every day, and I congratulate you and everything of the best. And I know that through hard work, reading, writing, thinking, you will get there. From my side then, thank you and good night. Have an excellent evening. Bye-bye.